report.
गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट। गना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। Today we're going to discuss about the Russia-North Korea deal and what does it hold for all concerned. But most importantly, what does it hold for China? And China looks like as if it's been jilted by this deal. Well, let me just explain. पिछले 1-1.5 महीने में ये सोच था कि रशिया, चाइना, नॉर्थ कोरिया और ईरान का एक गठबंधन हो रहा है. Linkages, new axis is coming up, called the axis of upheaval. Some call it the axis of evil, whatever. And I also did a video with General Raj Shukla on the Crick upheaval. It all seemed pretty logical. And one felt that, the alternate world order is emerging out of between Russia and China. And no holds barred kind of a deal between them and all that. And Russia was going to be the junior partner and all that. Well, just took 2 months of this thinking and it's been undone. That's the way I look at it. This Russia-North Korea deal has deeper implications than one has understood so far. I think many of us have gone wrong in thinking that an alternate world order is going to come with China and its help. It won't. But an alternate world order is being attempted individually by China and collectively by China and Russia. But how far it will succeed, that's a different question. Okay. So we have to understand this deal in its entirety to understand the larger implications. ये मेरा कोशिश है आज के दिन कि ये देखना है कि रशिया नॉर्थ कोरिया डील है क्या होगा, किसके लिए क्या कहानी है. बट सबसे पहले लेट्स लुक एट दिस मैप. आप देखिए इस मैप को. यू हैव टू सी द लार्जर कंस्ट्रक्ट वेयर नॉर्थ कोरिया इज. अगर आप देखेंगे इस मैप में नॉर्थ कोरिया बड़ा छोटा सा है, ऊपर चाइना है, पर नॉर्थ कोरिया also shares a border with Russia on the right or the northwest. In the south, it has South Korea, which is in a state of armistice. इनका लड़ाई खत्म नहीं हुआ है, पीस डील नहीं हुआ, it's armistice, right? स्थगित है लड़ाई along the 30th parallel, and it has a maritime boundary, North Korea with Japan. अगर आप देखा जाए तो चाइना और रशिया के साथ नॉर्थ कोरिया के संबंध अच्छे हैं, साउथ कोरिया और जापान के साथ नॉर्थ कोरिया के संबंध अच्छे नहीं है. जब तक हम इस नॉर्थ कोरिया के बारे में नहीं समझेंगे, ये पूरा कहानी अधूरा ही रहेगा. तो I'll spend a few minutes on North Korea. अब नजदीक देखिए. So to see, if you see North Korea, to the northwestern border is Vladivostok, and the northern border of North Korea is completely China. It runs along the Yalu River. Okay. The interesting part, let me go to the previous map, is that if you see the Chinese boundary, it doesn't have access to the Sea of Japan. China yearns to get free access to the Sea of Japan. जिस दिन चाइना का access होगा to the Sea of Japan, और अगर if it can get Vladivostok, China will be a superpower. I have no doubts about it. But then that's a different story. So, China is hemmed in, and China has to depend a lot on North Korea. Now, go into the details of North Korea a little bit. Okay, North Korea came into existence in 1948. The first ruler or dictator was Kim Il Sung. Now, his son Kim Jong Il became the second dictator, and Kim Jong Un, who's the third now country, is the third dictator of Korea. So, in a way, Korea is the first constitutional, or rather, the communist monarchy of the world. Unprecedented. The first communist monarchy of the world. Right, be that as it may. What does it mean to China? Let's understand the geography because later on we'll, of course, get back to it. In 1944, at the end of the Second World War, the communists, two things were happening. The world was settling into a bipolar world, and the communist movement was strong, and the communists were strong in Russia, USSR, and they were spreading their message world over. China had not yet got established. Korea is also you know in turmoil. Kim Il Sung flees in 1944 to Russia. Once the American interest appears to be receding, and America is more interested in rebuilding Japan, the communists may have come back into North Korea. In 1948, with the help of the Soviets, Kim Il sung established North Korea. This was before China came into being, and China was a very weak nation. So North Korea got established largely due to the Russian help. Okay, and then in 1950, Kim Il Sung became confident and it invaded South Korea, and the Korean War started. Then Americans came back. They did the Incheon landings. They wrapped up everyone, and as this whole process was going on, China got involved in this war, in the Korean War. China started helping the North Koreans with Russian assistance. But then, after the Incheon landings, the Americans outflanked the Korean forces and went up to the Yalu River on the you know uh, borders of China, and then China reacted more. The Americans got overstretched, and the Americans were driven back, and the South Americans and the South Koreans were driven back to the 30th battle. And there, the whole story ended. But for a long time, till such time USSR was in operation, it was USSR which held the cards, and North Korea USSR relations were excellent. And in those days, USSR was helping China also. But as the Cold War ended, USSR collapsed, North Korea went into a limbo. This was the time around, towards the fag end of Kim Il sung's dictatorship, and when Kim Jong il was to take over. And slowly, North Korea's dependency went on to China. But the, the North Korean relationship with USSR and Russia never withered away. Okay. But then 90s to 2000, you see till about 2004, 2010, till Putin came into being in 2005, until he took over Russia. Russia was not a player in North Korea. So North Korea gravitated towards China. But it always kept its doors open with Russia. Now with Jong un, Russia has made its play back. Ukraine war. Ukraine war happens, it continues. Russia cannot get, weapons and ammunition from anywhere. So it turns back to North Korea and they have a deal. And that is where we are today. Okay, so let's discuss this whole story now. The first thing, the general thinking is that the alignment of evil of Russia, North Korea, China, and Iran is evolving and hardening. But the reality is that the Russia North Korea pact might do more to fracture than solidify this burgeoning axis. Why this will happen? We'll just have a look at it. Okay. What is the Russia North Korea deal about? ये है क्या इसमें? What is the content of this whole story? Russia and North Korea have signed a deal. It's a comprehensive strategic partnership. It includes a clause of mutual assistance if either country is attacked. That others will come to help it. The implication today is for North Korea to help Russia, right? But tomorrow, if North Korea is attacked, the implication is that China will defend it. Okay. Now, how will this defense take place? How will this mutual defense take place? It's the interesting part. Is it just by giving ammunition to each other or threatening each other's adversaries? As it is, they have common adversaries in USA. Okay. So that's the critical part of this whole story. In exchange for North Korean munitions and ballistic missiles, Russia is providing, North Korea with military technology to increase its military capabilities. The question with everyone's mind is, does this extend to missiles and nuclear technology? If that happens, it could well happen. And I think it will happen. Then the whole scene changes. This relationship poses a serious challenge for the West in Europe and Northeast Asia, including China. Okay, so you're looking at a flashpoint developing around the Korean Peninsula. That's why I showed you the map earlier. Okay. Now, what happens? This deal takes place. Immediately, there's a hypersonic test by North Korea. It happened 2 days back or yesterday. It went Ori. You can see the trail of the missile, right? And this was reported. This was reported by Reuters and AP and everything, and even South China Morning Post. So it says North Korea fuels bid for new Cold War with failed missile launch after Russian treaty. So it's put already things into perspective that this might signal the new Cold War. Remember, when the Korean War was happening, the Cold War had started. In fact, many people say the Korean War of 50 to 56, right, was the first or the beginning of the Cold War, the first hot war of the Cold War between USA and USA. So this North Korean failed test, does it herald the Cold War? That's the thing. Okay. So now it's just not the hypersonic test. This is a failed test. What if Russia gives the missing links of this technology to North Korea? If it is prepared to give hypersonic technology to North Korea, it will also give nuclear technology. उसमें क्या है? So where do things go from there? That's the interesting question. We'll discuss it. Now, if that happens, you'll see Japan and South Korea also reacting. I'm sure they will. It's a matter of time. Right? North Korea having hypersonic capability is no good news to Japan and South Korea. So far, USA has not deployed nuclear weapons either in Japan or in South Korea. But there is a movement on that look, to defend South Korea and Japan, is there a requirement to deploy nuclear systems? If that happens, the whole thing changes. Then, for the past 2 to 3 years, there are views within Japan and South Korea of going nuclear. They say the time has come for Japan and South Korea to go nuclear. Now, that means you are potentially looking at a nuclear hexagon, which involves North Korea, China, South Korea, USA, Japan, and Russia. As of now, USA's nuclear systems are based at Guam, but it's there in the specific area. So just think of the problem China is going to be on. China will have a nuclear flashpoint on its east and a nuclear triangle, that is Pakistan, India, China in the west. What does it do for China's nuclear policy? And one might say, oh, we have a lot of nuclear weapons, we'll fire all around. But China is at risk equally and from different directions for different reasons. So that puts China on the horns of a dilemma. Okay. Now, this is what I read yesterday, and I'm just reproducing it. China, Russia, and South Korea share deep grievances about the US dominated global order. There's no doubt about it. And that's why we said the crick up evil and all that. All three seek to erode Washington's power and influence. But here comes the difference. He says that key difference between China and its partners is that China seeks to achieve such an aim without derailing its profitable ties with the world's developed countries. Very important. If China does not have good relations with the West, its economy will collapse. And I'll talk of that tomorrow. I'll talk of the maze in which China is tomorrow, because its property and the EV sector both are failing. And I'm talking sitting in USA, uh, having interacted with a few people about the Chinese EVs and what it means. But that's tomorrow. At this point of time, that is a danger. China cannot afford to antagonize the West beyond a point. Russia, anyway, is out of the West. It's sanctioned by the West. And North Korea is isolated. उनके लिए तो कुछ है ही नहीं from the West. So they can take actions the way they want. China can't. And China is hemmed in. So China is now facing a nuclear issue, and it's also facing its economic issue because of this deal. The first reaction out of this deal is that hypersonic itself. So interesting. Okay. What is China's nightmare scenario? What if tomorrow all this leads to reunification of Korea? Then USA will come and sit on Yalu. It isn't China's interest to ensure that Korea does not reunite. It does. If something like what happened, like German unification happens, right? Then there's a problem for uh, China. That's a nightmare scenario. And if the Koreans go to war once again, then trouble is on your borders. As it is, China is stretched with Philippines, whatever going on there. Taiwan is going farther away from them, and India is troubling them. And I'll talk of that India China relations on Friday with Sri Ayarji on P Gurus. And if Korea's go to war, China's had it. It's going to be completely military stretched, overstretched. Okay. Now let's look at the whole story from the North Korean viewpoint. first and foremost. Uh, this deal frees North Korea from the Chinese apron strings. Dur. Okay, it gives space to North Korea to do what it wants, and that doesn't suit China. It doesn't suit USA. It doesn't suit Japan. It doesn't suit South Korea. It can develop nuclear missile capabilities with Russian help. The thing is, so far there is a question mark on the North Korean missile capability, especially hypersonics and their accuracies, and a lot of failures. Not only nuclear missiles, it can go into space. Already they've done some space exploration. I think they put one satellite up, and the Chinese are not happy about it because the first satellite will take care of the area around you. And if the area around you is taken care of, that means China is under, a hostile gaze. That was not very interesting. Okay. Then North Korea and Pakistan have an old relationship, which can now be facilitated by Russia instead of China. After all, Russia is making overtures to Pakistan also. So China need not be the link between North Korea and Pakistan. It can be through Russia. Okay. Now, North Korea has already also made overtures to Iran. Iran and North Korea. Why? Iran wants to hedge against China. Everyone thinks Iran or China ka gadbandhan ho gaya. No, that's not so easy. Iran also is a very smart player. It will not put its hand completely into the Chinese bag. And North Korea has reservations of South Korea and Japan and China holding trilateral summits. They've held because China, if it goes antagonistic with South Korea and Japan, after these chaps are part of the West, its economic ties will fray. If that happens, there's problem for China. So they're holding trilateral summits to see how to balance between the economy and adversity and animosity between them. North Korea is not happy. So if someone thinks North Korea and China are happy with each other, no. And now that North Korea has got a way out with Russia, it will, it gets more independence from China. And why will not North Korea have good relations with Russia at this point of time? For a cash-strapped, isolated country, sale of ammunition is a big boon. It's a very big boon. Okay, right? I can't, but take this. Yeah, Jayant Kashyap's comment of communist monarchy. Don't you think so, Jayant? That for the past 75 years, you have three guys, father, son, and grandson, ruling North Korea, and it is now, without doubt, a communist monarchy. Have you seen an equivalent of this anywhere in the world? No, but that's how it is. And I'm glad you found it funny, but it's a reality. Okay, but that's not the case. But I thought I must highlight it to everyone. So fine. So that's the North Korean take. North Korea is very happy with this entire story. Okay. Now let's look at Russia. Russia will welcome a North Korean provocation on the Korean Peninsula. If North Korea becomes provocative, it forces USA to focus this side and focus away from Ukraine. It eases its own condition, plus it gets ammunition, right? It gets a source of ammunition and missiles because China will not give, China can't give. The moment the Russia North Korea relationship goes forward, all those ideas of China to get back Vladivostok and the Trans-Amur thing, which I spoke of, the Karakan manifesto and the salami slicing which China wanted to do across the Amur, they start receding. Okay, and this is strategic outflanking of China, which is happening within a framework, which means that Russia, we all think is a junior partner of China. It's no more so. Suddenly, China is quiet. It's not able to talk. It does not talk. It focuses on Philippines. जब Philippines में ये सब हो रहा था, Putin has gone and done this deal with North Korea. And Putin is also doing a deal with Russia, Pakistan. So he is giving it out to Pakistan also to move away from China. Look at it from different viewpoints. There's some strategic master moves going on from Russia and Putin. It puts China in a fix. So China is no more the senior partner in this deal. The larger aim will remain to counter USA, but the internal equations have started changing. And China can't protest against Russia because it needs Russia to counter USA. Okay. Now, Russia is also hedging China with Indian relations. That's something which is very interesting. This has just come about. We'll talk about it at the end. So Russia is playing a smart game. Okay. So it has put China in a corner at this point of time. And China doesn't have any cards to play. You see, China is stuck. And that's what I'm going to talk. China is in a maze of its own. And tomorrow, that's the topic. China in a maze of its own. Okay. They don't have time for the strategy and all this at this point of time. And this is a new front. Okay. Let's look at China. What does this create for China? Okay. Tomorrow I'm going to talk of China in a maze, largely their economy and things like that. But today we'll talk of the geostrategy here itself and finish it off. It's a new uncertainty for China. And it is likely to suffer from a jilted lover syndrome. यार ये क्या हो रहा है? कल तक तो ये हमारा I was in bed with this North Korean, and all of a sudden it's jumped ship and gone to Russia. So there's a jilted lover syndrome going on. Definitely, I have no doubts. Right, from what I've seen about China so far, China is today the jilted liver. इसको पता ही नहीं चला कब क्या हो गया वो suddenly North Korea and Russia have become pals once again. That's why I said go back into history. And Kim Jong-un is playing a very smart card by going back to Russia. So there's a new problem on its eastern borders, which you might dismiss it away, but it's there. Okay, collusion between Russia and North Korea was never favorable for China historically. Okay, tensions in the North Korean peninsula undermines Chinese security. It upends its three principles by which it's been operating: no war, no instability, and no nukes. All three are upended by this whole story. Okay, if North Korea wants to fire a hypersonic missile, whichever, whether it's a ballistic hypersonic or a cruise missile or a glide bomb, I mean, that is irrespective. Tomorrow it will put a nuclear warhead on it. The moment that happens, instability comes in. And North Korea is an important buffer zone against encirclement by USA. I told you, if USA sits on Yalu, it's a nightmare scenario. At the same time, Russia is important to counter the US-led world order. Now, US response to North Korea's growing nuclear and missile capabilities increases military cooperation with South Korea and Japan. Russia wants this focus, instability in the North Korean peninsula, so that USA focuses its energies here away from Ukraine. China wants exactly the opposite. Instability here will focus US attention on the Korean peninsula away from Ukraine. And the moment that happens, the focus comes to China. away from Ukraine. So China wants China wants USA to focus on Ukraine and Gaza. Russia wants USA to focus on Korea. So there's a tug of war going to happen. Ultimately, they might end up both losing. That's well on the cards. Okay. The only thing here is, I might tell you, Russia is already looking at the out with India, but China doesn't have an out. It doesn't have an exit from this mess which is coming. Okay. China seeks improving relations with South Korea and Japan to reduce frictions and counterbalance US influence. Whatever happens in North Korea upsets this story. So the trilateral between China, South Korea, and Japan will get negated. So China's economy is back at risk. This whole story puts Chinese economy at risk, its strategic value at risk. And then, of course, for China, like I said, South Korea and Japan might go nuclear, and the nuclear hexagon will be a reality. China could be drawn into a crisis or even a full blown war on the Korean Peninsula that it has no interest in fighting with long lasting aftermaths. I must explain this long lasting aftermath. For a long time after the Korean War 50s, China was in trouble. China was not prepared to go for a war anywhere outside China. The revolution had just finished. 49, right? It had just become an independent country, a communist country, right? And it had barely got recognition. It was drawn into the Korean War. For the next 7 years, it was fighting the Korean War. And 56, the war ended. Hostilities ended, but the conflict continued. And China got sucked into this without uh, its own interest. I won't say interest. It was not interested in fighting this war. Even then, there was a feeling in China that Russia pulled the plug at the right time and put China into war with USA as part of an indirect war as the Cold War game. What will China's state be if it gets into that kind of a thing today? That's something one has to understand. So it does not want to get involved in a crisis or a full blown war. Important. Okay, China wants to move up the technology and innovation ladder and accelerate its military modernization, which Beijing perceives is essential for compelling unification with Taiwan. Anything happening on the Korean Peninsula diverts China away from its main thing called Taiwan. After all, 19th Party Congress, 20th Party Congress, everything, China spoke of Taiwan. ये तो नया कहानी शुरू हो गया. Okay? Neither Russia nor North Korea has promising economic prospects. Okay. This is another interesting thing. Look, relationship with North Korea and Russia or China is strategic in nature. It's not economic. There's a limit. After all, what is the value of the Russian economy or the North Korean economy to support China? It can't. उनके लिए तो कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ता. किसी से लड़ लो. Now China cannot get away from the Russian oil also. It got some dependency on the Russian gas and oil. So China is stuck with Russia. But trade has reached its plateau there. If China has to recover economically, it has to go to the West. So this entire development which has happened goes against China completely. They're not talking. And probably not many people have analyzed it this way, the way I'm analyzing it. I see strands of this. I read through the past 3-4 days did a bit of research. Brookings said something of this. Atlantic Council spoke something of this, but not in a consolidated manner. I put it together holistically too, right? Okay. Another thing, China can control the escalation in the Taiwan Straits because the escalation control is with China as a direct participant. But whatever happens on the Korean Peninsula today is going out of its control because it will have no direct say over what Russia and North Korea do. They have now a mutual defense treaty, so they'll do what they want. Of course, China will have its thing, but it's going to get eroded. Okay, you can't say the same for Russian-backed North Korean adventurism. And let's be very clear: North Korea is an adventurous state for whatever it is worth. Now, look at it the larger picture. Pakistan and North Korea going out of control deprives China of its two main allies. अगर दो ally हैं चाइना का, इट्स पाकिस्तान एंड नॉर्थ कोरिया. अब पाकिस्तान के साथ क्या हो रहा है? China is saying, "Oh, go and get after all those militants and अज़म इस्तिकान शुरू हो रहा है." उसके बारे में बाद में बात करेंगे. In KP, already there is internal problem in Pakistan about it. Now, when Pakistan will run towards Russia and USA to get out from China. So Pakistan will not be in control of China in days to come, and Gwadar is going farther away. You want a naval base in a hostile country like Pakistan? China has to rethink. North Korea going out of control, then where does it leave China strategically? Economically and strategically, where does it leave China? Potentially, I have no doubt there's a new front opening up on its northern border. Putin and Russia are far too smart for what you salami slicing which China is attempting. Is there a lesson for us? There is. How do you manipulate China out of the whole equation? Is the issue at hand. There's a lot of value in what Russia is doing. And mind you, this is a good development for us. I'll come to it. What about South Korea and Japan? What is the skin in the game for them? South Korea and Japan see this treaty as a direct security threat. They are concerned about North Korea's nuclear program and its military strength, as it is even now. But with this thing, it will become worse. The Russian security umbrella will add to these concerns. That's what I just said. Now, that means both will strengthen their defenses and rethink their security policies. Already within South Korea and Japan, there is a people's movement that they should be Atmanirbhar like India, even nuclear. So, if that happens, the whole situation in the Asia Pacific context has to change. And suddenly you'll find that China has to focus a lot of more attention that side and forget about even Philippines. So China is going to get overstretched. Okay, right. Interestingly, South Korea convened an emergency meeting of its National Security Council in response to this deal and said it will now consider sending arms to Ukraine. So far, that has not happened. So, everyone was saying that, look, it's only USA which has to arm Ukraine, and Europe was ambivalent of giving, military logistics beyond a point. But now you have a new entrant. It says, okay, to sort out Russia, we'll give arms. We will, and they would be having old ammunition. After all, if they have old ammunition, why will they not give it to Russia or rather to Ukraine? They'll give everything to Ukraine, and they'll reproduce and this thing. So now Russia has got a problem. The dynamics are changing. Okay, and Okay, what else? Both South Korea and Japan will further cement their alliance with the United States. It's a problem for China. So all this, one has to factor in and say, okay, it's not that the new world order is setting and the new axis of China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran is going to provide a great thing. It's not a stable order, and I said this when I discussed this whole story with General Raj Shukla. उभरता हुआ है, let's see how it goes, and I'm seeing how it goes. Okay, then what's India's stake in this whole story? Very interesting now. So what happens? Look at this. Russia has approved the draft logistics agreement to be signed with India, and this is expected to be signed when our Prime Minister goes in the first week of July to Russia. And this logistics agreement was on for a long time. Russia had never agreed to it, or rather, it remained in draft form. Suddenly, the agreement has come. It is, in fact, this is what the report says. The agreement has been delayed for several years. It will facilitate military exchange for exercises, training, port calls, disaster relief, and ease of access to Russian military facilities, especially in the Arctic. So, this opens up the whole story in a different manner. It brings India into this whole game. So, Russia has hedged against China by going to India, knowing fully well that India has good relations with USA. So it's a dynamic situation. That's why I keep saying India is the new global balancer. Russia is using India as a balancing force now. Okay. We need to be alive to this. So let's look at the Indian angle. India has good relations with everyone in this whole story except China, including North Korea. That's surprising. But we have very good relations with North Korea to the extent feasible. It's a good development for India. It reinforces the role of India as the global balancer. When a new front opens up against China, it's good news for us. China has stretched in a different direction. And now the PM is going to visit Russia. What does it do? It strengthens Russia India equation. But interestingly, when does this happen? They're going to be port calls. I mean, let's look at the logistics agreement gets signed. It facilitates military assistance, port calls, logistics, everything. Plus, it gives you an entry into North to the Arctic Circle, which neither USA nor China was prepared to give you, but Russia will give you. So for us, it opens up a avenue. And then, if you see off late, USA is saying, about religion and minorities and Pannoon and Nijjar case and all that nonsense. USA will have to rethink. USA will have to start rethinking on real politics. What's the real politic? India has its options, and India must play its cards well. Right? The value of the India-Russia equation goes up a notch. Is it time for us to reach out to North Korea also? Real politics demands so. Is it time for us to reach into Myanmar? Again, we need to. But then Myanmar is a different problem because we've messed up Manipur. So we have to rethink this whole story. How do we handle Pakistan? But that all these are new things, a new story is opening up for which we have to be alive. The common thinking is what people talk or new access, yeah, but I don't believe in that. I'm a contra thinker in this. Today, I very clearly see China as the jilted lover. Okay, and North Korea has jumped into another bed with Russia. Great. I hope you people have enjoyed this analysis, different analysis. If you like this, please press the like button. If you also don't mind, if you're the first time user, subscribe to Gunner Shot and also tell your friends to join in. You know, make it more interesting.